Welcome to Clarified Solutions post, all about lateral thinking, finding those creative solutions to problems that may be arising for you. Now, lateral thinking is a really interesting strategy for thinking, incredibly pertinent at the moment, given how much flux and change there is. So I'll take you back to the history of lateral thinking. So an American gentleman by the name of Edward de Bono, wrote a book in 1967 called The Use of Lateral Thinking. Now, this particular book really did a deep dive into what is lateral thinking, what are its uses and applications, and what is the neuroscience that actually backs up lateral thinking as being an incredibly effective way of solving problems. So what Edward de Bono did is he thought that this particular unique style of thinking was significant, given that it is undeniable. The only constant in life is change, something which you may have heard quoted many times before. And one of the first people to actually, in written record, to quote this was Heraclitus, who is a 5th century Greek philosopher. So he certainly was on to a universal truth many, many years before our lifetimes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down lateral thinking into 3 core components that you can consider when applying this particular type of thinking to your work. You can also apply it to your personal life and really anything that requires a solution and where there's a problem. So first, what I would suggest is making a distinction between logical and lateral thinking. Logical thinking operates within specific parameters. So these parameters may be socially conditioned, may be points of reference that you have taken from multiple resources. And in essence, they guide and sometimes dictate behavior. However, the major point of difference with lateral thinking is that what you do is, for example, out-of-the-box thinking. Lateral thinking, you are standing looking at the box and considering what those constraints are and then how you can move beyond them. So what I'm going to do is break it down into 3 core areas, as I mentioned. The first will be identifying resources. The second is going to be effective questioning. And the third will be a particular process very well known to people in the technology space and project managers out there. So this is termed as building, measuring, and learning. It's a continuous cycle for product and service development. So first things first, let's talk about identifying your resources. So when you're logically thinking, remember, you're thinking not just with the box in mind, but with everything outside of the box as well. Consider what resources you have at hand. Now, these could be written resources, they could be other people's points of view, they could be experiences that you refer back to from your past that can be useful in informing your future actions. And then what you can do, once you have scoped out all of these resources, you can actually place them in a matrix. So matrices basically are a fantastic way of condensing a huge amount of information into a small amount of information and form a really great reference point, especially when you're tracking the progress that you make throughout a particular project. So the second point I would recommend when considering how to most efficiently and effectively use lateral thinking is in effective questioning. Now, there is a difference between effective questioning and questioning, which will be covered in future presentations. But for today's presentation, I'm going to prompt you with a few effective questions that you can ask yourself to determine whether or not you're really employing, to the best of your ability, lateral thinking. So one question could be, for this particular issue that you're trying to solve, what is your ideal result? Now, why would we start with an ideal result? Well, one of the things that can be done is to reverse engineer your way back or forward rather, to that ideal result. So that can be a really great starting point. Another question could be, imagine there are no limitations to the solution you could find. And by limitations, I mean financial, I mean resources, or even equipment or processes. No limitations. How could you create and sculpt a solution using lateral thinking to a particular problem? Then another few words which are very useful in framing your thinking about lateral thinking are, how can I simplify, combine, reverse, modify, and eliminate certain elements of this thinking process? So once you've done multiple rounds of effective questioning, what you can then do is move into a cycle, which is often, as I mentioned, used by product developers, especially in the technology space. As we all know, technology is always progressing. We are never really on the cusp of any particular breakthrough because so many people are simultaneously working on developing technology and the opportunities which then ensue after that. So what I'm going to talk about is a cycle that's basically encapsulated by building, measuring, and learning. So what happens in between these particular stages in the cycle is the creation of a prototype, or basically a sample of a particular idea or a product or even a service process. Then there's the analysis phase. So with analysis, it can be qualitative or it can be quantitative. Then it's very important, the insights are reflected in all sorts of different data that you can actually gain throughout this process. So what this means in terms of tech language is you can iterate, pivot, or persevere. These are the three options that you are presented with when you're creating a solution for the issue, whether the solution is an idea, a process, a product, or some sort of multitude of processes, a service. So whether you choose to iterate or create minutely different versions of the original solution, or pivot, so you want to do a 180 or even, just can go in a completely different direction with what you were originally choosing to do as a solution, or you can persevere. You can take that particular idea and you can run with it and take it as far as you possibly can. So here are some ideas about how you can approach lateral thinking, where lateral thinking originated from, and the purpose behind the origination of lateral thinking. I hope you may be able to join me this evening. As I mentioned before, I have a unique values proposition presentation. I'll be sharing the details below. I really look forward to hearing your comments and your thoughts on lateral thinking and whether or not you think this is something that is very useful for yourself in your business or in your personal life. And if so, what sort of applications can you see for using lateral thinking? All the best.